Okay, so picture this. It is the year 2004.
Right.
A massive cargo ship is just slowly gliding into a port in southwestern France. It's carrying, a totally mundane shipment from Shanghai, just a load of terracotta bonsai pots.
Nothing exciting at all.
Exactly, just clay pots.
Yeah.
But hidden inside one of those pots is a tiny stowaway, a single fertilized insect queen.
And as she flies off that ship, she is about to completely alter the ecological landscape of an entire continent.
It sounds like the opening scene of a science fiction movie.
It really does. But that single insect initiated a biological invasion that researchers across Europe are still, struggling to contain. The speed of the expansion is just staggering.
And the ecological ripples are affecting everything, right? Like local biodiversity, agricultural economies.
Oh, absolutely everything.
Well, for you listening, as someone who loves cutting through those sensationalized headlines to understand the actual mechanics of our natural world, this deep dive is going to provide a lot of clarity.
Yeah, we've pulled together a massive stack of sources today. Data from agricultural authorities, biodiversity databases, ecological research.
Right. So our mission is to equip you with the true story of the Asian Hornet, scientifically known as Vespa velutina. We're going to examine its explosive spread, the anatomical traits that make it such a lethal hunter, and the devastating ways it shuts down honeybee colonies.
Plus the rather ingenious methods entomologists are using to fight back, because understanding those mechanics is critical.
Right, because this isn't just an abstract issue in a distant forest somewhere.
No, not at all. This is happening in urban parks, suburban gardens, local vineyards.
So to start, this hornet is native to a broad swath of Asia, right, spanning from India through China and down to Indonesia.
Exactly. And the specific subspecies invading Europe, Vespa velutina nigrithorax, well, it found a climate in Europe that perfectly mimics its native habitat.
Which is why it's expanding so fast.
Yeah, roughly 80 to 100 kilometers per year.
That is wild. I mean, looking at the mapping data, they started in France, but now they are established in Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany, Belgium, the UK, Switzerland.
And recently spotted pushing into Austria and Hungary, too.
Wow. And they naturally use river valleys as aerodynamic corridors, right?
Yeah, they do, yeah. But they're also getting a massive assist from human infrastructure. A fertilized queen will tuck herself into a truck carrying timber or, agricultural goods.
And just leapfrog across international borders in hours.
Exactly. But what's really fascinating here is the genetic data underlying that continental expansion.
Oh yeah, the DNA studies.
Right. DNA sequencing of populations across over a dozen countries strongly suggests that the entire European population of this invasive hornet,
Wait, all of them?
millions upon millions of individuals, they all descend from that single fertilized queen introduced in France in 2004.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if millions of these hornets all come from one single queen, shouldn't they be suffering from like a catastrophic genetic bottleneck?
You would certainly think so.
Because basic biology dictates that extreme inbreeding concentrates harmful recessive mutations, right?
Yeah.
It weakens a population, makes it fragile.
It normally does doom a population of mammals, for instance.
So how are they dominating a continent with essentially zero genetic diversity?
Well, that paradox is one of the most interesting aspects of hymenopteran biology. That's the order of insects that includes bees, wasps, and ants.
Okay.
They bypass the traditional dangers of a genetic bottleneck through a reproductive mechanism called haplodiploidy.
Haplodiploidy. Okay, what is that?
So in this system, females, the queens, and the workers, they develop from fertilized eggs. They have two sets of chromosomes, just like humans.
Makes sense.
But males, the drones, they develop from unfertilized eggs. So they only have one set of chromosomes.
Oh, wow. So if a male inherits a lethal or harmful genetic mutation,
He doesn't have a second healthy chromosome to mask it. He expresses that harmful trait immediately and dies before he can reproduce.
so it's essentially purging deleterious mutations from the gene pool in real time.
Exactly. Because the bad genes are constantly being flushed out through the males, a population can expand from a single queen without that severe inbreeding depression.
It's like a biological cheat code.
It really is. And you combine that cheat code with the fact that they arrived in Europe completely devoid of their natural top-down predators.
Like specific Asian birds and larger hornet species.
Right. And you just have the perfect recipe for unchecked exponential growth.
Which means they are rapidly expanding into new real estate, making it crucial for you to know exactly how to identify them.
Yes, identification is so important.
Because there is a massive amount of public confusion mostly fueled by clickbait media. It's leading people to confuse the invader with local, highly beneficial species.
Oh, the media panic is awful. It typically centers around a completely different insect. People hear Asian hornet and immediately picture the Asian giant hornet.
Right, Vespa mandarinia.
Yeah, the one that generated all those terrifying murder hornet headlines in the U.S. a few years ago.
But the species we are discussing today, Vespa velutina, is actually slightly smaller than the native European hornet, Vespa crabro.
That's right. If you see a hornet that looks absolutely massive and intimidating, counterintuitively, it's almost certainly the native European hornet.
Because the invasive Asian hornet workers are generally only about 1.7 to 2.4 centimeters long.
While the native European ones routinely push past 3 centimeters.
So the easiest way to spot the invader is by looking closely at its anatomy, specifically the color blocking.
Yeah, Vespa velutina has a very distinct, dark appearance. Its thorax is entirely velvety black, which is where we get the negrothorax part of its scientific name.
And its abdomen is mostly dark as well, but punctuated by this wide, bright yellow or orange band on the fourth segment, right near the tail end.
But the most reliable field mark, honestly, is the legs.
The yellow boots?
Yes, the yellow boots. The legs of the Asian hornet are dark at the base, but the lower halves end in bright yellow tips, while the native European hornets just have completely reddish-brown legs.
It's all about functional design. I like to think of the native European hornet as a heavy-duty transport chopper.
That's a great analogy.
Right. It's bulky, flies a bit clunkily, wears a classic chunky yellow and brown pattern.
Very loud.
Yeah. But the Asian hornet is built like a highly maneuverable attack drone. It's a sleeker, lightweight chassis wearing a black stealth suit.
Equipped with those bright yellow landing gears to grip prey midair.
Exactly. And they operate on different schedules, too.
Yeah.
The bulky native hornet is active day and night. It's the one bumping into your porch light.
Right, whereas the sleeker Asian hornet is strictly a daytime operator.
So this raises an important question. What happens when the public doesn't understand these functional and visual differences?
Well, it's tragic, honestly. The native European hornet, the transport chopper, is actually an endangered and strictly protected species in many jurisdictions, like Germany.
Because they're peaceful and they control common garden pests.
Right. They are vital to the ecosystem. But when panicked citizens grab a can of bug spray to fight what they think is the Asian hornet, they frequently end up illegally destroying the nests of the very native species environmentalists are trying to protect.
Which is just heartbreaking. But that sleek attack drone anatomy you described for the invader, it isn't just for show.
No, it perfectly facilitates their hunting strategy, which is exactly why ecologists and farmers are so deeply alarmed by their presence.
Because to understand the threat, we have to look at their metabolic requirements.
Yeah.
Adult Asian hornets run on carbohydrates, right?
Yes, they feed primarily on sugary substances like flower nectar, tree sap, and ripe fruit for flight energy.
But their larvae back in the nest require massive amounts of protein to develop.
Massive amounts. And to source that protein, the adults deploy a highly specialized, energetically demanding hunting technique known as hawking.
They target honeybees.
Almost exclusively in some areas.
And the hunting strategy is ruthlessly efficient. The Asian hornet will fly to an apiary and just simply hover in midair right in front of the beehive's entrance.
Yeah, they sit there facing away from the hive, just watching the flight paths.
Like a blockade. And when a worker bee returns from a long foraging trip, she is exhausted and heavily weighed down with nectar and pollen.
Making her slow and unmaneuverable.
And the hornet just accelerates and snatches her right out of the sky.
It is brutal. Once the hornet grapples the bee, the physical processing of the prey is immediate. They drop to the ground or a branch and begin dismembering the bee.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they amputate the head, the wings, the legs, and the abdomen. They discard all of it.
They only keep the thorax.
Just the thorax.
Because the thorax houses the bee's flight muscles. It's the most incredibly dense, protein-rich piece of meat on the insect.
Exactly. The hornet essentially butchers the bee to extract a pure protein meatball, cleanly packaged to carry back to its growing larvae.
And a single Asian hornet can kill up to 75 bees a day in the late autumn.
Which is when their nests are at maximum capacity and larval protein demand is just skyrocketing.
But while that direct predation sounds devastating, the secondary behavioral effect on the beehive is actually what causes the entire colony to collapse.
That's the real issue. It's a psychological phenomenon known as foraging paralysis.
Right. When honeybees detect the constant presence of these hovering predators, They release alarm pheromones.
Specifically, a chemical compound called isoamyl acetate.
And this chemical signal inside the hive triggers a systemic lockdown. The bees recognize they are outmatched in the air, so they simply stop leaving the hive.
They refuse to forage.
But as they hunker down in a state of constant stress, they're burning through the nectar and pollen stores they desperately need to stockpile for the winter.
So the colony essentially starves itself to death out of fear.
The hive collapses not just because the hornets are eating the foragers, but because the systemic fear response prevents the bees from preparing for the cold months.
It is a brilliant, albeit brutal, exploitation of the honeybees' defensive mechanics. And the collateral damage extends way beyond managed honeybee apiaries.
Yeah, diet analysis in our sources shows they also hunt wild, solitary bees, wasps, hoverflies,
And various other insects.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we look closely at that diet analysis, they're also hunting significant numbers of flies and mosquitoes.
They are, yes.
So since mosquitoes and flies are massive nuisances and vectors for human disease, couldn't someone argue that the Asian hornet is actually providing, like, a highly beneficial pest control service?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of ecosystem dynamics, the math simply doesn't support that argument.
Why not?
Because while they do incidentally consume nuisance insects, the sheer volume of predation pressure they place on vital native pollinators creates a catastrophic net loss for the environment.
Because the wild bees and hoverflies they decimate are foundational pollinators.
Right. Exactly. For countless wild plant species and agricultural crops. Introducing a hyper-efficient, non-native apex predator that scales up to thousands of individuals per colony, it just disrupts the delicate balance of the food web.
And that disruption hits the human economy directly, too. Because remember, adult hornets require massive amounts of carbohydrates for flight energy.
Right, the sugar.
So in the late summer and autumn, when natural nectar sources start to dry up, adult hornets descend on orchards and vineyards to gorge on ripe fruit.
They possess incredibly strong mandibles. They literally bite right into the grapes and apples, just ruining the crop for harvest.
The European Commission estimated that in 2019, agricultural damages in Spain alone hit roughly 4.5 million euros, with some vineyards reporting up to 75% damage to their grapes.
So between the pollination cascade and the direct agricultural damage, managing this biological invasion is a Tier 1 priority.
But to stop that ecological cascade, authorities cannot just swat individual hornets out of the sky.
No, that's impossible. They have to neutralize the source, the nest.
And the nesting behavior of Vespa velutina utilizes a unique architectural strategy that makes them incredibly difficult to locate.
They operate on a two-stage real estate model. It's essentially a military staging strategy.
Right, so in the early spring, a single queen emerges from hibernation and builds the primary nest,
Which acts as a quiet, low-profile forward operating base. It's only the size of a handball.
and she strategically builds it in low, sheltered, human-adjacent places, right? Inside garden sheds, under the eaves of roofs, or tucked deep into dense shrubbery.
Exactly. The queen rears her first generation of worker hornets in this small, hidden nest. But as the summer progresses and that initial workforce expands, the primary nest simply cannot physically support the population.
So the entire colony executes a coordinated relocation.
They abandon the forward operating base and construct a secondary nest.
And this secondary nest is the fortified command center. The scale of these structures is staggering. They can reach 60 to 100 centimeters in height. That's roughly 2 to 3 feet tall.
And they can house an active population of up to 10,000 individual hornets.
But the real defense mechanism is where they choose to build them.
Yes, they construct these massive fortresses extremely high up in the canopies of tall trees.
Meticulously woven among the branches, and completely shielded by dense summer foliage, so they are practically invisible from the ground.
Most aren't discovered until the leaves finally fall in late autumn, and by then, it's too late. The colony has already reared and released the next generation of queens to hibernate for the winter.
And while the hornets are generally non-aggressive when you encounter them foraging on a flower, they exhibit a fierce, hyper-aggressive defense response if you encroach on the airspace around that secondary nest.
Very aggressive. And the biochemistry of their venom makes a defensive swarm incredibly dangerous.
The sting from an Asian hornet isn't just a localized swelling. The venom contains high concentrations of a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine.
Right, and when injected, acetylcholine acts directly on your sensory nerves. It essentially hotwires your pain receptors.
Sending a massive, unmitigated signal to your brain.
It creates a severe, sustained burning sensation that is significantly more agonizing than a typical wasp sting.
Furthermore, the venom contains histamines, meaning multiple stings can trigger profound allergic reactions.
Or even life-threatening anaphylactic shock in susceptible individuals.
Because of the extreme hazard of these defensive swarms and the vast geographic area the hornets now occupy, the scientific consensus has fundamentally shifted, hasn't it?
It has. Eradication, completely removing the Asian hornet from Europe, is no longer mathematically or physically possible.
The strategy has pivoted entirely to management.
Yes. The objective is to keep population densities below the threshold where they cause systemic ecological collapse.
And managing a continental population of invisible tree canopy fortresses requires a massive coordinated effort.
Entomologists simply cannot cover enough ground.
Which is why environmental authorities are relying heavily on citizen science. They need you. Countries across Europe have established dedicated reporting portals.
So if you see an insect wearing the black stealth suit and those distinct yellow boots, or if you spot a suspect nest in a tree, authorities are pleading with you to report it.
Because when you report a sighting, you provide the crucial data point needed for a fascinating technique called triangulation.
Yes, triangulation. Here's how it works. When authorities receive a cluster of sightings in a neighborhood, they set up bait stations containing sweet liquid.
They wait for an Asian hornet to land and feed.
And when the hornet flies away, observers use a compass to record its exact flight path, known as the vanishing bearing.
But a compass direction alone just gives you a line. It doesn't give you distance.
Exactly. So they time the hornet, they hit a stopwatch when the hornet leaves the bait station, and they stop it when that specific hornet returns for a second helping.
Oh, because entomologists know the average flight speed of Vespa velutina.
Right, which is roughly 4 to 6 meters per second, so they can take the total round trip time, divide it in half, and multiply it by the flight speed.
That is genius. That calculation gives them a highly accurate estimate of exactly how far away the nest is.
They draw that vector on a map. Then they move the bait station a few hundred meters down the road and repeat the process.
And where those two lines intersect on the map is exactly where the hidden nest is located.
Yep. Some cutting-edge teams are even using tiny microtelemetry tags glued to the hornet's thorax to track them via radio signals directly to the canopy.
Incredible. But there is a vital rule you must follow if you spot a nest. Never, under any circumstances, attempt a DIY removal.
Absolutely not. Do not spray it. Do not throw a rock at it. Do not try to knock it down.
The sheer volume of hornets inside makes it incredibly hazardous. Leave the neutralization to the professionals.
They use specialized, thick protective suits and telescopic injection poles to introduce targeted insecticides directly into the nest entrance from a safe distance, neutralizing the colony before it can launch a defensive swarm.
So your job is strictly intelligence gathering. Observe, take a clear photo of those yellow legs if you can do so safely, note the GPS coordinates, and upload it to your local environmental portal.
Because every nest neutralized before late autumn means hundreds of potential queens are prevented from establishing new colonies the following spring. Your observation directly disrupts their exponential growth curve.
So what does this all mean? Let's trace the incredible disruptive journey of Vespa velutina. It began with a single fertilized stowaway queen hidden inside a terracotta pot from Shanghai.
By exploiting a genetic loophole called haplodiploidy, her descendants bypassed the rules of inbreeding to execute a rapid continent-wide invasion.
We've learned how to distinguish their aerodynamic black and yellow-booted anatomy from our protected native species. We've uncovered the grim mechanics of how they butcher honeybees for flight muscle protein, triggering a chemical panic that starves entire hives.
And we've seen how they construct massive invisible command centers high in our tree canopies. It is one of the most vivid, real-time examples of biological invasion we have ever witnessed,
Demonstrating exactly how human global trade can inadvertently rewrite complex local ecologies in the blink of an eye.
Yes, but you're no longer just a passive bystander watching this unfold.
You are now equipped to protect your local biodiversity. During your next hike, walk in the park, or afternoon in the garden, look closely at the insects around you. Keep an eye out for the yellow boobs.
By actively observing and reporting, you provide the critical telemetry data needed to pinpoint these hidden fortresses and protect vital native pollinators.
As we conclude our analysis of the sources today, I want to leave you with one final concept to consider. Think back to that single fertilized queen in 2004.
Just one microscopic fluctuation in a massive shipping manifest possessed the biological power to alter the ecology and the agricultural economy of a continent.
It forces us to ask a much larger question. With tens of millions of shipping containers crisscrossing our oceans every single day, what other invisible microscopic ecological shifts are quietly taking root in our backyards right now?
Just waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows of our hyper-globalized world.
Well, that certainly makes you look at a massive cargo ship in a completely different light. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep observing, stay fiercely curious, and we'll catch you next time.